my predictions for America and perhaps the world 2021 and perhaps beyond. So it was a very difficult 2020. Mass civil unrest, pandemics, market crashes, a lot of tensions brewing. Many argue we're in a civil war, and I expect these problems to get worse. No question in my mind. First of all, my predictions can be off because it all depends on how they're going to continue these restrictions, lockdowns, if we're going to have a total lockdown, how they're going to continue the PUAs, the rent freezes, the forbearance, what's going to happen to mortgage rates. Mortgage rates start going up. We could see a slowdown in the housing activity and perhaps prices falling next year or so. And then, of course, if prices fall, it's going to be followed by the next crash in the stock market, just like what we saw in the late 2000s. But anyway, I just believe it's going to be more of the same, believe it or not, and even worse. So you're going to have more closings, more businesses shut down. I believe crime levels are going to either keep going higher or not at the levels of they were in 2019. And you're just going to see a lot of tension going on. And this could have a lot of negative effects on perhaps the population numbers. Birth rates are very low. And depending on the immigration levels, which I believe they're going to be low, we could have very low population growth in the U.S., perhaps negative population. That this country disproportionately is really saddled in debt. That's the really sad part. And in addition to the debt, even though if everything starts opening up tomorrow, we just don't have a lot of confidence. People just don't have a lot of disposable income. All this student loan debt, all this credit card debt, it's going to start really starting to strangle our economy. Because I know they're freezing it or they're giving people breaks, but it's going to have a biting effect perhaps later in the year and beyond. Now, as far as policy making, I do see a lot more military conflicts. The powers that be, look at their voting record. They did vote for the Iraq War and many other military conflicts. We saw a lot of military interventions under Libya. Don't be surprised if Syria, Iran, many of these other countries are next. Don't be surprised if a lot of horrible trade deals get passed. The TPP is ratified again. And it's just really saddening to see what people have become. Just the quality of people has deteriorated. Not just looking at Antifa and the violence. You just look at how men and women have evolved over the course of decades. You can see how our people have gotten more crazy, lack of morals, more frustrated, more violent than ever before. The quality of the people has deteriorated. And I believe there's just going to be more tension regarding the debt. We could see perhaps government shutdowns. We could see a lot of different concerns. State and local budgets are going to be in turmoil. You're going to see a lot of people fighting about how the Fed should cater to the states that have been reckless, like California. And speaking of the federal government, I believe the national debt's going to surge. I wouldn't be surprised if we have $33 trillion in debt really in the later part of the year. And I wouldn't be surprised if there's going to be a lot of fighting. Our credit rating could go down. There's going to be a time where we're going to be wondering how we're going to pay the interest for the national debt. Now, is this going to lead to massive numbers of inflation, like 20-30% of a year? I doubt it. I just don't believe in the fear-mongering, buy gold, dollar's going to collapse. I just don't believe in that because they've said this about 10 years ago or so. But again, everything has its limits. You can't just keep borrowing and jacking up the debt forever. Another trend that I just wanted to talk about is I believe there's going to be a lot of civil disobedience. There's going to be a lot of defying the orders of the mask mandates, the shutdowns. There's going to be people who are going to refuse their taxes. There's going to be people who are going to refuse to follow new orders, perhaps on gun regulations. How the pandemic has really exposed the trends of gender, particularly women. People are going to see more and more ever that the welfare state, this career-oriented women, this ability of having kids out of wedlock or, this divorce, the marriage rates, all this change that we've seen in family and genders for the last 60 years, all this is going to be more exposed. A lot of this is starting to backfire. And I think that we're going to see signs of this really start to crumble, not to mention a growing movement to bring back more traditions. And we're seeing this in number of YouTube channels, and I'm going to be talking more about this topic in the coming years. You're going to see a lot more scandals going to begin to form. I mean, a lot of these people who just got in charge have a number of scandals, number of controversies, and I think a lot of them are going to roar. I think there's going to be a lot of truth bombs that's going to get out there, and I think it's going to really enrich both sides. I think you're really going to see a lot of people who are just going to spread the information. I think perhaps finally we may see some justice or some kind of more of a deserving outcome from all this, because we have seen scandals plague this country, especially for the last 30-40 years, and people are just getting tired of all this. And I know there's going to be a lot of movements to censor us, to basically perhaps shut down the internet and all that stuff, but we're also starting to see people are moving to other platforms. It's backfiring. And if we see the internet shut down, my gosh, I don't know, maybe people are just going to have to get to their neighbors. They're probably going to have to text each other via telephone numbers. I mean, that's going to be very difficult to suppress that. But as far as I know, maybe this is going to resort to a lot of people moving out to certain states. You're seeing a lot of people are beginning to flee California, New York, New Jersey, Illinois, and they're moving to many other states. And as a result, you're going to see a lot of these budgets experience massive numbers of financial turmoil, massive budget cuts, including Nevada, believe it or not. And I think Nevada is going to be among the hardest hit. You're going to see a lot of people, just frustrated. They're going to move to rural communities. They're going to establish areas that have their like-minded interests. They don't have to deal with the hiring practices, all this negative information that could destroy their livelihoods, all this political correctness, and I think you're going to see more of this balkanization going to continue. I believe that the stock market's going to be bullish for 2021. I'm going to make a video about that later on. I believe inequality is going to continue to grow, no question about it. The powers that be don't have a good track record of dealing with that, and it's one of the reasons why a lot of people supported Bernie and Tulsi and all these other people instead. You're going to see more corporate mergers and acquisitions. So basically, a lot of mergers, acquisitions, fewer choices, eroding of the American middle class. It's been shrinking ever since the last 50, 60 years. Speaking of immigration, I wouldn't be surprised if they try to pump more caravans, refugees, or whatever. But then again, with a lack of number of jobs, not to mention it's going to be harder to provide benefits, the jacking up of the national debt, who would want to come here? So I wouldn't be surprised for 2021 or perhaps 2020, we're going to have negative immigration levels. And all this is going to spur more protesting activities. A lot of people are very frustrated. They don't trust and rely on the elections. I think we're seeing a lot of left-wing people are not really excited as much as they used to be, because who's going to get the checks? And both sides are going to get angry, take to the streets. You're going to see more rhyming effects of Occupy movement, the Tea Party, left wing, right wing, center, more efforts to censor us, shut down the internet. And I think one of that is going to be simply you've got young people that are not getting anywhere in their lives. This is one of the reasons it's causing Antifa. Student loan debt, people have not much to do. They bribe them to smash windows. You see a lot more of that. You saw that just a few days ago. And a lot of this is going to be tax revolts. People just don't have the money. They don't want to fund the government. They don't trust the system. They don't trust the elections. Why should they participate? And that's going to accelerate the national debt. And all of this, by the way, I can see this happening all over the world. There's going to be greater world tension. And not to mention, you're going to see a lot of states like South Carolina, Tennessee, Nebraska, Wyoming, Idaho. They want to consider using their 10th Amendment rights, defying the orders, and perhaps thinking about seceding from this country. It's just too large to manage. People are just tired of the conflict, the heating up of civil war, all of this political correctness, just division, our rights being taken away. They just think it's just too large to govern. We have to have a divorce, and we're better off by just moving on our own. So there's going to be a lot of proposals to secede. I think the time is due. I think people need to separate and learn their lessons. And all this is why? Well, largely due to the fact that we are so politically correct. We're afraid to speak our mind, get things done, because we don't want to be labeled as a racist, bigot, sexist, xenophobe, whatever you want. And as a result, we just never really get a lot of problems done. And I think that's going to be another trend. Political correctness is going to be really, really exposed. And before you know it, the people who we shoved aside, we're going to realize perhaps they knew what they were talking about. All right? Yeah, I know a lot of surprises people, the things I talk about on this channel, considering how I look. But then again, it's what the truth that matters. So people are going to regret this. All the name calling that they've done in the months and years to come. All right, anybody, what do you guys think for 2021? Where you think we're headed? Are you optimistic? You let me know.